My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluent. Today's webinar is on the Matrix crash course. And what I really want to emphasize today is how to help you become more successful through more effective prioritization. And I really want you to have some really key takeaways, and hopefully you'll make an impact to your workflow right away. What I want to start with is a quote that has inspired me recently. It's from Tony Robbins, and it's that productivity is not about time management, but it's about misplaced attention. Now, what I really like about this quote is that I think it conveys the challenges that I personally face extremely well. There's so many things that on my table, so many things that I could do. So the question is, what should I do? And one of the things I notice around people who have, really good work habits and so forth, is that they spend a lot of time thinking about what they should do. And a lot of us, we have so many things on our plates. Our calendar is always full. We have so many meetings and so forth. And yet we don't ever ask the question, are these meetings meaningful? Are these tasks useful? Are these actually driving our goals? So this is one of those things where I've spent so much time thinking about just for myself and then seeing customers face these challenges. So I want to bring this up because what I want to show you today with Matrix is around capturing and overcoming these misplaced attention. So then we are always focused on what matter most. So my goals to help you understand the basics of Matrix, understand and apply what's called the Eisenhower Matrix, then walk you through how to prioritize personal, team, and organizational tasks and goals, show you basic collaboration features, so then you're not just prioritizing your own work, but prioritizing for your team, and then how to prioritize emails and conversation. So one of the most important thing that all of us deal with almost every single day is that you get these emails. Vast majority of them are not important, yet at the same time, you're trying to make sure that your most important emails are not dropped and that you actually be able to ensure that you go back and get those important emails answered. And then lastly, I'll show you some of the other features in Matrix, including how to generate email reports, how to restrict projects, create seamless reports, and then also how to showcase your work for performance reviews. It's actually really interesting because, I think that one of the challenges we all face is that we're always just sort of like running forward, right? You have a lot of things on your plate, you're doing more and more and more things. And then when it comes to performance reviews, you have no idea, you can't remember all the things that you've done. And so one of the things that we've done in Matrix is make it so easy to surface that up so you can generate your reports within minutes. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize too is that I'm going to show you a lot of features and I'm going to show you a lot of capabilities in Matrix, but I want you to remember that it's the 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of the features in Matrix will give you 80% of the value. And I'll emphasize those features as I walk through the product and show you how to put it into practice. But keep that in mind. You can think of everything that we have created here as just a set of tools, the hammers, the pliers and all that. And so what you're really doing is picking the right tools to make your workflow work. That's the number one thing. A couple of thoughts on how you should think about Matrix as you're embarking on this journey with the software. The first is what happens today. Now, one of the things I want you to do is make sure that after today's webinar, get Matrix installed on your platforms. So if you use Mac, Windows, iPad, web, Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Matrix is on every single platform out there. So then, pretty much it allows you to be ubiquitous. And so then the second is create your first personal and team project. So you want to start prioritizing some of your work. As I mentioned, we spend so much time thinking about, well, we spend so much time doing things and we spend so little time thinking about what we should do, that I think the most important thing for you to do is just to put it down into something that's tangible. And Matrix offers that as a first starting point. Then over the course of the next 5 days or so, what you're going to be able to do is start reviewing your priorities with team members. One thing that I think happens that we don't spend enough time doing is just constantly review, refocus, and reprioritize. And so what that means is you have today's priorities, then you have the priorities tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, right? It's constantly changing. And so we should never have a static system. And that's the power of Party Matrix, being able to help you prioritize and reprioritize very seamlessly. And then also, by the end of 5 days, pretty much this week or next week, you're able to check in with your manager to ensure alignments. And that's the key. Party Matrix is a way to ensure that you and everyone that you work with are on the same page. We have a lot of assumptions of what people's priorities are. People think we're on the same page, and the reality is it's implied, but it's not explicit. And sometimes by being explicit, you can actually gain a lot of value. And then over the course of a month, one of the things that I think you're finally able to do is to start reprioritizing those teams and organization goals. It's not just about your priorities, but about ensuring that everyone else that's around you is on the same page. And then also it's very important to create a habit of prioritizing your tasks and emails. One of the things that, customer brings up all the time is the challenges around prioritizing their emails. And one of the things that people do wrong is they try to prioritize everything. And that's just not possible. There's just too much. And so all you're doing is you're bringing your, long list of emails into Party Matrix. And I don't think that's valuable. Instead, you should look at Party Matrix as a way to prioritize the 20% of your work that's most important. And if you do that, I think you'll get a lot more value. And then lastly, one of the things I want you to do over the next 30 days is eliminate time waster so that you're focusing on the most important tasks. One of the habits that I've gone into doing is just, deleting meetings, as in like, don't attend meetings that are not valuable. Don't just take meetings just because they're on your calendar. And so the same thing applies to all the tasks that we have as well. So Party Matrix can let you capture everything, but I really want you to focus on the things that are truly important to your work. So what is Party Matrix anyways? Party Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software. And we help at 3 different levels. The first is at the individual level, which is where I think is the most important. So what we do is we help you prioritize your emails and your tasks. That's pretty much it. What you're doing is you're making sure that you're working on the right things. But what happens though is that if you prioritize your work, and then your manager prioritize their work, your coworkers prioritize their work, then you can actually come together and see if there's alignment or misalignment. And so that's how we help you prioritize and actually ensure that you have alignment with the people that you work with. And what happens is that as you use Party Matrix over time, we actually keep sort of a history and a revolving reports of around all these things that you do. And so it creates what's called a single source of truth, not just for yourself, but for the entire organization. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if someone leaves the organization, right? Happens every single day across, your organization. And what happens then is you have to decide, wait, who's going to take on these tasks and what are their priorities? And what happens to a lot of organizations is that all those priorities, all those tasks, all the records of all those changes go with that person who leaves, right? And so that person has all those priorities in their head, all the context in their head, or in emails that's so obfuscated that you can't even find out exactly what it is that they've been working on. So with Party Matrix, it's actually so simple. You can actually go select all the tasks from that person, be able to reprioritize it, and someone else can get the complete context along with all the history of all those tasks. And that's extremely valuable. The corollary to that too is if you go on vacation, someone else got to take over your task too, right? And so that's what I mean by the single source of truth. It's not just around capturing the task, but it's capturing the context and the priorities of those tasks, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. So let's start with the fundamental concept behind Party Matrix. There's a quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us understand that things are not single dimensional. And so what I mean by that is this. Imagine if I asked you to take out a sheet of paper and write down the 15 things you have to do. Okay, go ahead and do that. And by the way, this is exactly what you should do when this webinar is done. If you really want to think about how to reprioritize your work, this is where you got to start. So write down those 15 things you have to do. So I'm going to ask you the next question, which is you're going to have to choose one to work on. Which one do you work on first? Is it the first thing that came to your mind, or is it the last thing, or is it something that's somewhere in the middle? And you can see how when you have a list, it's actually very hard to decide what to work on. So instead, you ask these simple questions. Is this task important and is it urgent? And so what you end up with is what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. So you have the important and urgent tasks. Well, those are your high priority tasks. And then the important but not urgent, those are your medium priority tasks. And then the urgent but not important, guess what? They're low priority. They're not medium or high. They're actually much lower on the totem pole than you'd expect. And then lastly, you shouldn't have anything that's not important, not urgent, right? Why have that down at all? Instead, you use quadrant 4 as sort of like your bucket, and that's where things go. And that's where you have sort of like your inbox, where you capture everything you could do, and then you prioritize them within these other 3 quadrants. So it's a very, very simple exercise, but it's something that not a lot of people spend time doing. Instead, they just look at their to-do list, and then they start at the top or they start at the bottom. And so all I'm asking you to do is just ask that extra question of, is it important and is it urgent? And that's how you get to the Eisenhower Matrix. Now, the magic of this is the following. Imagine if you did this exercise. Then imagine if your coworker did this exercise, your manager did this exercise, your direct reports did this exercise. Then you walk around and you start comparing notes. And that's the key, right? So you go to your manager and then you look at your priority list, you look at his or her priority list, and guess what? Imagine if everything was perfectly aligned. Fantastic, no problem, you're amazing. The interesting thing is when they're not aligned. And so suddenly something that you thought was high priority is not even on their list. Imagine that. Or imagine something that was on their high priority list and you weren't even aware, right? And then the same thing happens to everybody else that you work with. And so by doing this, just this simple concept of the Eisenhower Matrix, we get to alignment so much more quickly because guess what? We focus on 2 things. The first is the things in the high priority quadrants. And the second is where we have disagreements. So if you are agreed on everything, you don't have to have a meeting. You can move on because everyone can go back and just get their things done. But the moment you discover disagreement, you should focus all your attention on those conversations. So I like the visualization that you walk around the office and you just see a 4 quadrant matrix floating over everyone's head. So imagine that. And so your conversation suddenly becomes much more effective and meaningful. The same thing applies if you actually work with external people. Imagine if you're an enterprise customer success person and you work with your customers and your customers have their set of priorities, but you never explicitly talk to them about it, right? Imagine being able to see that so you can see how the communication channel becomes a lot more effective by being able to hone in on the things that matters. So the 4 quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignments because it forces you to prioritize. And the hardest part is putting it into those buckets. So if you're finding that you have a hard time prioritizing, that's a good thing. That means you're doing it right. If you're asking hard questions, you're doing it right. If you find that everything is in one quadrant, like everything in quadrant 1, then you're doing it wrong. Because if everything's important, then nothing is, right? And then so success from using Matrix isn't from finding out what everyone agrees on. It's discovering disagreement on what should be a priority when it isn't. So one of the things I encourage you to do, and again, even if you use Matrix in a very limited form, when you have your meetings, just project Matrix onto the screen. And the moment you do that, your conversations become so much more meaningful because everyone will get the context right away. And I've seen tremendous amount of success from executive teams to, high power teams, just looking at their party matrix, looking at the quadrants and starting where you disagree. A couple of insights that I've gathered over time, having talked to thousands of customers who use party matrix over the years. The first is, if everything's important, then nothing is important. So I want you to think about that as well. So when you use Party Matrix, if you find that everything is in quadrant 1, think again. That means you're not doing it right. And so at the same time, if someone assigns you a task, like let's say your manager goes and assigns you a task and says, this is extremely important, then you put that in the quadrant 1, then you ask the question, okay, I see that this is important and urgent. What am I getting rid of? Right? I can't have everything in here. So what are we deprioritizing? And if the answer is no, we can't deprioritize this, then wait a minute, we're doing it wrong. We have to go and choose. If you have 60 hours of worth of work in a 40-hour work week, how can you get that done? So I want you to use Matrix to push back to your manager, push back to your customers, so then you can have that meaningful conversation. The second is that important tasks should always have due dates and clear, well-defined ownership. What I mean by that is if you have a task and you decide not to set a due date, and then how can you understand if it's urgent or not, right? And so my recommendation is if something is in quadrant 1, you should always have a due date on it, and you should always have clear ownership. And by clear ownership, that means the right person is responsible and they are aware that they're responsible. The third, which is actually kind of interesting, is don't track everything. Track what matters most. Recently, I talked to a customer, and they're trying to bring their entire company emails into Matrix. And my pushback is like, don't do that. That's not a good use of your time. That's not a good use of your resources. All you're doing then is moving emails into Matrix, and now you just have another mess somewhere else, right? That's not the point. Instead, just prioritize what matters and use Matrix to track the higher level stuff. So that the same thing applies to the emails, as I said here. And so the next part is actually think of Matrix as a communication tool. And when I say communication tool, what I really am trying to say is that it takes the stuff that's in your mind that you're assuming, that you're implying, that you think other people are aware of, and you're making it explicit. And by explicit, it means it's tangible, it's visible. And so then you can have that meaningful conversation. I dislike, one of the challenges that I see and I find most troublesome is that you have two people talking to each other, and then they just make a bunch of assumptions, and then they never communicate around the things that helps them align, and then you walk away from the meeting and still you have no idea what you should work on. That's the worst. And so spending all your time working on the wrong things, I think, is extremely bad use of your resources. And then lastly, this is perhaps controversial, but I put it down because I wanted to, bring it up as a tip for all of you, which is concrete, clear, but wrong priorities are actually better than invisible assumed priorities. And let me explain. Let's just say you use Matrix, you write down all your priorities, and then you put a bunch of stuff into quadrant 1, okay? You go to your manager, and then your manager looks at it and says, wait a minute, I don't think these should be here. Guess what? You've just had a meaningful conversation, and you now can reprioritize those wrong priorities. But imagine if you didn't write it down, you go to your manager, you talk about a bunch of stuff, your manager does not realize that you have priorities that are different. Then guess what? That doesn't even come up. And so now you both walk away thinking you're working on the right things, but you're not. The same thing applies to your direct reports. And so if you're a business owner, you have so many people doing so many different things. How could you possibly know what it is they're working on? Or if you are an executive and you're trying to make strategic decisions and you assume that everyone around you is actually working towards that goal, but again, it's not explicit, how would they know? So these are the tips that I wanted to bring up because if you watch this webinar and if you want to walk away from today just being more effective and more productive, I want you to put these guidelines into practice. It has taken me many, many years and thousands of customers over the past more than a decade to actually come up with some of these concepts. So I do think they're very important. I want to mention that the webinars are, the recorded webinars are on our website at affluence.com/webinars, and that's where we also have other webinars. But with that, let's jump into the product so I can actually show you how to put this into practice, okay? So here I have my Matrix open. So if you haven't used Matrix before, or if you haven't opened the application before, this is what it looks like. On the left-hand side, you have your list of projects. So a project is pretty much a 4-quadrant. So if, for example, here I have a project called My Personal Priorities. I select that project, and guess what? I have 4 quadrants: high priority, medium, low priority, inbox, right? That's the uncategorized. So as an example, let's create a task. I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants. I'm going to say something else, due tomorrow at 2 p.m. and I pressed enter. Now, as you can see, Matrix jumps to a new line, so I can actually just type a lot of tasks at the same time. And that's one of the things that I really like about our software, which is the ability for you to capture and brainstorm really quickly. So make sure you use that. And if you have a lot of things that's on your mind, go and type, and you can just write it all in the inbox, and then you can figure out where they belong afterwards. But now I've created this task. Now, if I select this task, it opens what's called the item details. So here you can see how I have the task name, but since I said due tomorrow at 2 p.m., Matrix uses what's called natural language to process that, and it sets the due date to tomorrow, 2 p.m. my local time. So if you use it in your time zone, it would set it to your time zone, whatever that may be. And then I have owner, so who's responsible for this task? Since this is just me in my personal project, guess what? It starts at me as the initial owner. But if I need to delegate to another person, I simply click on that and I assign it to another person. And now you can see that their avatar shows up. So it's very easy for everyone to be able to see exactly who's responsible. You can go and upload your picture instead of getting just the first letter of your name here. Now, next to our task, we have a couple things we can do. The first is we can add an icon. So for example, maybe there's some visualization that you want to add to this, and it's just a way to categorize the task because you can sort by icon, or you can star the task for something that's important. And then down here, I have progress, 0 to 100%. If you have subtask, let's just say you have 5 subtasks and you get 2 subtasks done, then progress updates to 40%. Or you can manually edit this as needed. Then you have efforts, reminders, and due dates. Now, here's one thing I want to mention to you. I told you earlier how if you have a high priority task, I strongly recommend that you set due dates. But here's one more thing that's different about due dates and reminders. Let's just say if I have something that's due next week and it'll take me 3 days to do. So I set a due date for next Friday, but next Friday comes and how can I possibly do 3 days worth of work in one day? So what happens is that you use the reminder system to keep this task as top of mind. So if I click on here, one of the things I can do is I can go ahead and say, remind me daily. And now on a daily basis, I'll get a reminder to work on this task. The reason why this particular feature is so important is because it's effective. And let me explain why. What happens is that we have so many things that's going on at any point in time. Having things be top of mind is extremely important. So I'm sure this morning you opened your emails and you got a bunch of different emails. And what email did you look at first? It's probably that last email that came in, right? And then guess what? One of the emails that probably will get your attention over and over again is that, that salesperson or that drip email or that message from some company. And it's like the 6th time they've sent you a message. Guess what? It might not be important, but the fact that they've sent it to you over and over and over again, it has been extremely effective at staying top of mind for you. So that's the same thing that happens to our work as well. So my advice to you is if you have something that's truly important, not only do you set a due date, but you set a recurring reminder so that it stays top of mind. And it's just a trick to ensure that your brain thinks about that important task. And honestly, for me, I use this every single time. So when I need to follow up with a customer, I would say due in 1 month, and I would say remind me monthly. So if the month comes and I miss it, guess what? I'll get a recurring reminder. So even if it's in the past, I'll get a reminder until I get that task done. So it's a very useful strategy to ensure that we work on those most important things. Now, another reason why the reminder worked differently from the due dates is the following. Let's just say, again, I have something that's due next Friday, right? Maybe it's top of mind for me. Maybe I'm thinking about it. And so as the calendar, as you move closer to the day, you're thinking about that work. You're dreading about it. You know you got to get it done. But the moment the due date passes, guess what? We start to not think about it. Then you start to forget it. And so every single day after the due dates, suddenly that task has become less and less important, even though it's a high priority task. So by setting the reminder, it's there until you get that done. So it's totally separate, totally different, and they work to complement each other. So down below here, I have the chat section. This is where I can communicate with my coworkers. I can say, Eugenia, can you take a look at this? Or I can even mention her. I can say, mention a collaborator here. And then I can mention Tyler. Also, please review. So what I've just done is that actually I've just roped in multiple team members into the conversation and ensure that everyone's on the same page with respect to any particular task. Now, my recommendation to you is when you create your first project and you're creating your personal priorities project, you don't have to invite anybody. You're just capturing the tasks that you have. So then you can go to your manager and show your manager, by the way, these are my priorities. Let's talk, right? But then as you use Matrix, one of the things that I recommend that you do is create what's called a team priority project. And so in this particular case, if you have a team priorities project, you can see how, you might assign multiple tasks to different people. Now you can see their avatar show up in different places. You can see the various tasks that they have. And then not only that, Matrix lets you prioritize projects too. So as you can see here, I have a project called Team Priorities, but maybe I have a task and that task is itself linked to another project. And so here it's sales lead and there's a little icon. If I jump to click on that, it takes me to another matrix in which I can prioritize even further. So one of the things that exists in Matrix is these concepts of linked items. And so if you select a project, one of the things you can do at the top right of the project is copy link to project. And so if I copy that link to the project, and then I go back to my team priorities, and when I create add item, I just paste it, and I press enter, Party Matrix automatically inherit the information from that project and pull it into this task for you. And the beauty of that too is that Party Matrix lets you see the information from other views and perspective. So let's talk about that for a second. So here I have my team priorities. And so again, for those of you who actually want to take Party Matrix to the next level, I recommend that you create this project as your second project. And if you're a manager, this is almost mandatory. I think this is the best way for you to use Party Matrix effectively, because all you got to do is create these tasks, assign to different people, then in your staff meeting, project this on the screen. It's as simple as that. So then when you have a conversation, guess what? During your staff meeting, you talk about the things that's in quadrant 1, right? Go through that list first. One of the mistakes I see people have in their staff meeting is that they just talk about whatever's top of mind. So you go around and you say, hey, like, what's your progress update for this past week? And guess what? Your direct reports are more likely to just talk about the thing that just happened that morning or the things that happened yesterday, as opposed to the things that truly matter. And so by using the Team Priorities Project, you make sure that, yes, you could talk about the recent things, but at the same time, talk about the most important things, which are the things in quadrant 1. And if they don't belong in quadrant 1, then reprioritize it, right? So for example, reprioritize it, Party Matrix lets you drag and drop, and now you've just moved something from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, and it's as simple as that. But you can do it live during the meeting. Everyone who goes back to their computer will have all of this information synced, and so there's no confusion as to what the priorities are, and this is the single source of truth for the team. Now, one of the things you can do in Party Matrix is actually also switch views. So the quadrant is, our primary view, but at the very top here, you can go to the list view. The list view is actually very useful for finding all the tasks that are overdue. So if you go to here, you can sort, so just like an Excel sheet, you can sort by due dates, modified. If you click on filters, you can even select additional columns too. So you can say, you know what, I want to sort my task by when they were completed, or their effort, how much effort it takes to do that task, when they were created, when they're supposed to start, and so forth. So Party Matrix lets you do those custom columns directly here. And then not only that, of course, you can add additional filters, and you can say, what are all the tasks assigned to a certain person? What are the tasks that's been finished, and so forth. Our filter section is extremely powerful. And so as you use Party Matrix more and you go beyond, hundreds of tasks, you're going to find that the filter section will give you a lot of insight around your work. So here I have the list view, and then I have the Kanban view. So let me talk about the type of projects you could use in Party Matrix. So as you can see, I recommend that personal and team project, but there are 3 types of projects in Party Matrix. The first is what I call transient project. And so transient project has a start date and an end date. An example, a construction project. You have over the course of 18 months, you've got 60 tasks you got to do assigned to various folks. They're linked together in certain ways. at the end of 18 months, you hope to have every single task done. So the Kanban view here is very good for that visualization because it allows you to see what are the things you have to do, what are the things in progress, and what are the things that's done. So as a project manager, you go to this view and suddenly you have a very good perspective on what's going on. Then the second type of project is what's called persistent projects. So these are ones that last forever. As an example, at our company, we have a project for each of our application, our Mac app, Teams app, Windows app, web app, mobile app, right? They all have their own set of priorities because we have feature requests, we have things we're working on or whatever else that's on the plate for each of those tasks. But guess what? That project never goes away because we're actually constantly building more and more tasks into it. And so in that particular case, you can go and you can actually use one of these other views. So for example, the calendar view will let you see what you need to work on over the course of the next few months, or what's called the Gantt chart view. And the Gantt chart view, the way it works is anything with due dates will show up here. And let me see if I can jump to another project that has more tasks for you to see what a Gantt chart looks like. Let's see here. So here, for example, if I go to this Gantt chart, you can see Matrix automatically generate the Gantt chart for you. There's no manual work that you have to do. As long as you have the due dates and so forth, it shows up here. Then you can create those dependencies as needed. So the way it works in Matrix is that we have the quadrants as the core, but at the same time, we're able to help you visualize all these tasks using all these other views for you to see the tasks that you have. Now, I want to switch gear a little bit because I want to talk about emails. And that's probably the number one reason why a customer comes to Matrix, which is to prioritize their emails. So here, I'm going to go ahead and open Outlook. And let me ask you a question, right? Let's just say you get a very important email and you can't answer that email right now. Nothing you can do about it right now. So what do you do to make sure you don't forget? If you're like most people, you just go ahead and flag it, and then you can mark it as unread. And then, if you have 5 flag emails, not a big deal. But if you have 50 flag emails, then what? What do you do? So with Matrix, one of the things you can do is install our Outlook extension. So here I have Outlook for web, but Matrix works for Outlook for web, Outlooks for mobile, Outlooks for desktop, and so forth. And you click on apps here, and then you click on add apps, and you search for something called Matrix, turn emails into task. And when I click on this option, I can choose prioritize emails. And what I can do is I can convert this email into a task in Matrix. And so this right panel will pop up. And one of the things I'm able to do is actually convert this email into a task, put it into appropriate projects. And let me see here if I refresh it. Go ahead and click on that option again. Oh, my apologies. For some reason, that panel doesn't show up. Let me see here. So what I'm able to do, if this was working, it actually shows you the list of project that you can put this in, and then be able to capture this email as a task. And when you do that, it saves it into Matrix. And now I can set a due dates. I can set a reminder to ensure that I answer that email. But here's one more thing I can do. Let's just say if the Outlook extension wasn't available. When you go back to Matrix and you click on what's called the inbox here, you can capture what's called the secret inbox address. And so this is actually something I do on my mobile device. And so this is a secret email address, a unique email address that's available only to you, unique for each of you. And so if you click on this right here, you can copy this email. So what I like to do is I like to save that email on my mobile device as inbox Matrix. That's the contact name. So now when I'm out and about and I get an email and it's an important email, guess what I can do? I can just forward that email to this address, and it creates a task inside Matrix. And then from there, I can prioritize it as needed. And then not only that, when I forward that email into Matrix, I can say, due tomorrow. I can say, remind me in 3 days as command inside Matrix. And that allows me to capture that task, set due dates, and even delegate to other people as needed. So the reason I do that is when I'm on my mobile device, I use an iPhone, I use Apple Mail. So therefore, I'm not using Outlook. And so being able to capture the email without having to open a piece of software is extremely useful. So now that we're in the inbox, I want to show you a couple of other things here. I mentioned the list of projects on the left-hand side, but at the same time, at the very top here, these are what's called notifications. So earlier, I actually assigned a task to a coworker. I even mentioned a coworker. So from their perspective, how do they know what they need to work on? And that's what these views are for. So if you get a new assignment, it shows up right here. You can see that, maybe some people assign me some task, and then I can click on this task, able to edit it or mark it as done or update it as needed. And then the second part here is that if you mention somebody, that doesn't mean that you assign it to them. It's actually just a way for you to tell others that, hey, this is something that requires your attention. And so Priority Matrix also breaks that up and then show you the task where someone mentions you. So when you start your day with Priority Matrix, you're doing the exact same thing, which is you look at these views and see if there's anything that requires your attention. Did you get new assignments? Did you get new mentions? And so when you use Priority Matrix, there's two primary use cases, right? Either you're the person who's delegating a lot of tasks, or you're a person who actually just get delegated tasks. And maybe there's a combination of those in between. But if you get a lot of assignment, guess what? You just go here every single day, look at the things that's on your assignment. And then not only that, you have this thing called the overdue. And if I actually have tasks that's due today, and I click on that, it takes me to what's called my agenda, which pretty much shows me everything I have to do for today, for tomorrow, for the rest of this week, and then also what are the things that I missed that I didn't get done yet. And so that's why those due dates are so important. So if you set those due dates, they'll show up here. So again, when you have those tasks that are very important, that's the reason why you set due dates, because they'll show up in your agenda as well. Now, there's one thing I want to show you, one trick I want to show you on the top right here. When you click on this option, now you can choose items I own, items I follow, or all items. And here's what you do. If you are mostly doing tasks that are assigned to you, you want to choose items I own. If you are a manager and you delegate a lot of tasks to others, I recommend you choose items I follow. And when you do items I follow, what happens is that not only do you see the tasks that are assigned to you, but you also see the tasks that you assign to others. So imagine if you have 5 or 6 direct reports, you just want to know what's on their plate, what's on their plate tomorrow, what's on their plate next week, what are the things that they have overdue. That's what this view is for, directly from the agenda view. So that's how these view works. And so I recommend that, when you use Priority Matrix, pay attention. And then as you can see, there's something called the alert section. And this is where you get all the notifications of all those tasks that are due, all those reminders that you set and so forth. So this means I have 37 items that requires my attention. I can just click through each of these and get them done. And then sometimes I just want to go ahead and clear my slate, and I go to the top right here and then clear all notifications. So one of the things I want to show you now is how to create projects in Priority Matrix, since we talked about, the different types of projects and then also the different types of tasks. To create a project, it's actually very simple. You click on projects here, you choose create projects. Now, there are several ways to create projects. The first is a blank project. If you click on blank project, you can pretty much type in whatever you want as a project name. You can choose a user group, which means, various teams that if you want to associate the project with a whole group, for example, a department or something like that, then you can also choose one of these color themes. The colors themselves don't make it, there's no impact in use case in functionality, but it's just a visual way for you to track the various types of projects that you have. So for example, at your organization, you might have HR project be one color, engineering project be another color, and so forth. Then you can also click on template here and choose some of the basic templates that we've created for you. So the moment I type in a name, I can click add project, and I'll get a blank matrix just like what you saw I had earlier. I can also choose from what's called public templates. So here at Affluence, we've created something like 1,000 templates for you to use for free. And essentially the way it works is that a template is one, changes in names to the quadrant names, also changes in colors, and then also you can pre-populate the quadrants with tasks. So let me give an example. If you choose, for example, the 30, 60, 90-day template, Priority Matrix will change the quadrant name. Instead of high priority, medium, and low priority, you get the quadrant names 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. This allows you to use Priority Matrix in a different way to organize your tasks. So you can go ahead and try these out depending on your particular use cases. One of the things you can do, though, is you can build your own templates. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you create an employee onboarding process. And so you've created these 4 quadrants, and within those 4 quadrants, you have a series of tasks, and it's something you got to do day 1, something you got to do day 7, day 30, and so forth, right? Maybe you got to go through training and all that. Once you create a matrix in Matrix, you can convert that into a template. And after you create it as a template, when you need to onboard a new employee, you don't have to create those tasks from scratch again. Instead, you go to My Template, select Employee Onboarding Template, set their start date, and Matrix will automatically create all those tasks for you, and then set the due dates from that start date. So then the employee knows what they have to do day 1, day 5, day 30, and so forth. So that'll save you a lot of time and resources. You can also use our AI system to create projects. All you have to do is type in your goal, and Matrix will generate the task for you. It's meant to give you a really good starting point. And then also Matrix has really good integrations with CSV files. So I'll show you an example here. So here I have an Excel CSV file. You can actually create your own CSV file, or you can export Matrix as a CSV file. And so you can see all I need is actually a list with the header name, and then I can create all the tasks that I need. I can even choose the description, which is in the notes essentially. And then also, if I want to set start dates, I can even pre-assign it to people. And the moment I create this as a template, whenever I need to create a Matrix project, I can actually just choose import from CSV, and then Matrix will go and convert all of these into tasks for you. So very, very useful. And it's also a good way to generate reports as well, because when you export Matrix as a CSV file, you'll get something like that. And it could track the amount of effort that each person has spent on particular task. So that allows you to actually build, pivot tables or reports or whatever it is that you need. The reason I want to bring that up to you is because Matrix is meant to be a system where it's not just around the tasks that you're tracking today, but everything else that follows afterwards or beforehand, the planning process as well. Okay, so that's how you create a project in Matrix. And since I mentioned to you that you can convert a project into a template, I'll show you how to do that real quick. So let's just say if you create a project here, task for your accounting client. So every time that you launch a new accounting client, you have a series of tasks. I select this project, I go to the top right here, and then I simply choose save project as template. And that's how I can actually save that template and be able to reuse that over and over again. And also here is where you can export as CSV or import from CSV and so forth. Now, one of the new features we just added is what's called restricting the project. And so here you can actually have projects, and I'll show you again in my list of projects, and you'll be able to see what I have. So on my list of projects here, a couple projects has this little lock icon. And so I can actually right click on a project and choose restrict. So Matrix gives you various levels of permission. So for example, in my weekly staff meeting, I can click on members here and invite various folks. And so that allows these other people to be able to see all the tasks in this project. But the way Matrix works is that if you don't restrict the project, anyone can invite other people. Or you can also delegate a task from a project to another person who's not in the project. So that gives you that flexibility. But at the same time, if you have a sensitive project, you don't want other people to do that. And so by restricting project, only the project owner can invite people. And then also you cannot assign tasks to someone who's not in the project. So there's multiple use cases, but if you're in HR in particular, that's the number one thing. Or if you have a project for executive planning or whatever that may be. So one of the things I want to talk about, one thing I want to mention is that don't be afraid to create projects. So in my work account, I have more than 300 projects. So it's a lot of projects, but at the same time, a project is meant to give you context, right? And so let's just say if you're managing multiple factories, every factory should have its own project. You can't commingle those things together. You want to create clarity. And so by doing that, everyone who's working in that factory will know exactly what the priorities are. So my advice to you is create as many projects as it takes for you to actually properly track the context. So then the question is, how do you then figure out what to do across projects? Well, Matrix helps you in multiple ways. The first was what I showed you earlier, which was the agenda, right? So if you click on home and you click on agenda, this gives you information and finds you all the things you have to do across all projects in the first place. And so it's very easy for you to see that. But the second is Matrix actually has these things called global views. So on the left-hand side here, I can go to the global calendar, and the global calendar actually shows me all tasks across all my projects with due dates on it. And so as you can see, it's very easy for me to see what my calendar is like. And I can click on projects, and I can even choose a subset of projects that I want to see the dates for. Now, as a manager, maybe one question I have is, wait, what is on so and so person's plate? Well, guess what? I can click on this filter, I can change the person, and now I can suddenly see the calendar for my direct reports across all of their projects. And so this gives you a lot of visibility onto those tasks that you otherwise wouldn't get. And so the calendar view here is a global calendar for all those tasks. Then you have what's also called the global Gantt chart. So when I click on this global Gantt chart, not only do I see the list of things I have to do for a particular project, I can actually see it across all projects. And guess what? Our filter system works the same way. You can click on project here, and you can build a subset of projects to see the Gantt chart for that. So if you're in a construction project, and maybe that construction project has multiple Matrix projects, well, guess what? You can go to here, select those projects, and you can suddenly build a Gantt chart across all of that. In fact, actually, a customer I talked to recently has a really interesting use case, which is they have a major project, but that major project, they also want to track how they do the initial planning versus the actual details in practice. So let me try to explain that better. So let's just say you have your initial planning, and your initial planning, you have things mapped out for the next 18 months. Well, guess what? When you accomplish those tasks, they might be accomplished at different times. And so some might be behind schedule, some might be ahead of schedule. Well, guess what? You can just clone or duplicate that original project that was your initial goal, and then you create a second one. And so now you can see how here you can select two projects, maybe they have the same name, just slightly different, and you can actually pretty much compare two projects side by side to see if you're getting things done on time. So these are different use cases that you can apply to our global Gantt chart system, depending on the value that you need from Matrix. And then we have what's called the search view, which is what I call the master view. This is the one place where you can find out everything that's in your Matrix. Now, the way Matrix works is it's a permission-based system. So for example, I might have a personal project, and if I don't invite you to it, you wouldn't be able to see my tasks. That's as simple as that, right? And so what that allows you to do is when you go to the search view here, you get to see everything that you have access to. If your coworkers did invite you to a project, you're not going to see their tasks. So when you go here, I can click on filter, and then I can see all the tasks I have. Now, one use case I mentioned to you earlier is performance reviews coming. I need to go and find out everything that I've done so I can just paste it into my workload, work HR system. Well, I can go to the search view, go to the filter system. I can go and say, find all the things that were assigned to me. Okay. Now I want also say all the things that I finish, and then I can even choose what date, and I can choose what projects, filter the type of projects. And so now suddenly I've done a couple of that filters. I can group this by project, and with just a couple of clicks, I've generated a list of everything that I have accomplished over the certain number of months, right? And now I have all of that. Then I click on this drop down menu, I select all, and I can do two things. I can go to share, and I can export as a CSV, or I can click email items. The moment I click email items, Matrix generate this nice email for me with all the tasks that I've worked on that I finished over that time period. I can select this, copy and paste it into whatever report system that I have to do. So as you can see, Matrix will give you all these summaries and reports that you can use for whatever purposes that you need. But then at the same time, this is how you can find out what are the things your direct reports have worked on. What are the things that are on your colleagues' plates? So one of the scenarios I've seen over and over again is that you have someone goes on vacation and they have a bunch of tasks that you need to assign to other people, and it's across multiple projects. You don't want to go and click through 300 projects to find out their tasks. You simply go to Matrix, click on filters, select them, And now suddenly you have all the tasks that they have to work on, right? You can sort by the tasks that are overdue here. And then again, go to select. Maybe you select all, or you can just select a few. And then you go to drop down, and then you click on edit, and then you change the owner to somebody else. And so with just a few clicks again, I'm able to go and reprioritize or redelegate tasks across all my projects, and Party Matrix aggregate all that information for me together in one centralized view. This is extremely powerful. I think that I can't really do it justice, but when you run into the scenario where you need to bulk edit tasks across all projects, this is one of the most powerful systems out there. Now, the last global view I want to show you is what's called the one-on-one view. The one-on-one view sort of flips everything around. So, we talk a lot about projects. And so when you work on the things you work on, you think about, okay, what do I have to do? But sometimes you want to think about what are the things I have to do for so-and-so person. So imagine as a manager, you have 5 direct reports and you want to know what are the things that, that person's working on. You go to the one-on-one view, you select the person, and guess what Party Matrix does? It flips everything around and it shows you a people-centric view. Now I can see everything Eugenia is working on, tasks that are assigned to her, but where I'm a follower. So she may have tasks that's not relevant to me, but the one-on-one view finds you all the tasks that are relevant to both of you in one central view. And so from here, I can see the things that she's working on, the things that are overdue. And when I have a one-on-one meeting with a person, it's so useful because I open up my one-on-one view and we can just talk about the task that's on their plate, right? We don't have to go and click through a bunch of projects to find out the task that they're working on. And then not only that, I can click on filters. And again, I can see exactly what project they're working on. And I have that complete flexibility on identifying what I need to have a meaningful conversation. And then during the one-on-one call, you can click on add share task and create a task directly from there. Now, what we've done is we've integrated this directly into Microsoft Teams. So if you have Microsoft Teams, this is actually a really neat way to use Party Matrix, which is you go to the chat here, click on this plus, click on Party Matrix, and then you can add a one-on-one view onto every chat that you have with your coworkers. So as a manager, you go to each of your direct reports, you add the one-on-one view, you select the person, and now I don't even have to go into Party Matrix anymore. Instead, I just go to the one-on-one tab here and see all the tasks each of my coworkers working on, and then I can click at add share task if needed. And when I have a meeting, I just open up this view and we can have a conversation right away. And it's aggregating information across all the projects. That is a time saver because it's so hard for us to go and click through everything. There's no way we can do that. So I strongly recommend that you use this option if you have a lot of one-on-one meetings and you want to know exactly what everyone's working on. Within Microsoft Teams itself, Party Matrix is probably the most integrated solution for Teams and the Office ecosystem. And so, for example, a couple things you can do that's really powerful. Imagine if you have a conversation with somebody, you can actually just click on that conversation and then create Party Matrix tasks directly from that conversation. And then not only that, you can actually even click down here, click on this plus, and then choose Party Matrix, and then attach task directly into the conversation. So the use case here is the following. Imagine if you assign someone a task, a coworker a task, but they don't see it because they don't log into Party Matrix or whatever. You can go into the conversation with them inside Teams and then select the task from Party Matrix and send it to them directly in this conversation here. So as you can see, they can actually see the task, the information, the due dates. They can click on view item to open it, and they can even mark task as done if it's assigned to them. So that's a very useful integration inside Microsoft Teams. Similarly to what I showed you in the web app, Party Matrix can be integrated directly into Teams. So simply click on plus here at apps, search for Party Matrix, then you pin it on the left-hand side, and now I have the entire Party Matrix application inside Teams. The reason this is helpful is because you don't have to switch contexts. One of the challenges I have is I have so many tabs and so many software that it's hard to switch around and all that. So Matrix exists within Microsoft Teams, allowing you to access everything that you need without leaving Microsoft Teams. And actually, if you use Outlook for web, you can do the exact same thing too. Click on this apps right here, search for Matrix, and then you can pin Matrix into Outlook. So we are called a universal app. So what that means is that Matrix can be installed on one platform inside Office, and then it exists everywhere else in the Office ecosystem. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that our Outlook integration and our universal app are two different things. So you do have to install both for prioritizing email as well as accessing the application within Outlook and within Teams. Okay, so let me try to wrap this up because there's just so many different things that you can do with Matrix. I want to highlight the things that truly matter. One, when you use Matrix for the first time, make sure you set up the project called My Personal Priorities and then My Team Priorities. Very, very straightforward. And then start writing down those tasks that I mentioned to you, right? Those 15 things that's on your mind, write them down. You can put them all in quadrant 4 if needed, then reprioritize them. Make sure that you don't put everything in quadrant 1, because if you do, that means you're not truly prioritizing your work, right? If everything's important, then nothing is important. So keep that in mind. When you have your meeting this coming week, just open up your party matrix, share it on the screen, and say, hey, by the way, these are our team priorities. Let's start here. And then you can have that meaningful conversation with your coworkers and have that disagreement. Disagreement is a good thing, but party matrix makes it explicit. Now, if you plan to use Party Matrix with your coworkers in the project, simply click on this plus right here and invite the appropriate people to the project. And if you do, then they'll get access to the entire project as well when they log into Party Matrix. And then everyone's on the same page. So it's very useful to make sure that, there's no confusion. So there's no reason why anyone who walks back to their desk should be confused what their priorities are, because that team priority project should give you that full visibility. So that's what I recommend as a starting point. And then as you use Party Matrix, then you can create some of these other tasks and these other projects and the recurring projects or the templates and so forth. Remember that your high priority projects should have due dates. So if anything's in quadrant 1, make sure you set that due date. Make sure you set those recurring reminders so you actually answer those tasks and so forth. Party Matrix lets you attach emails, attach links to SharePoint, OneDrive, also pictures and so forth directly here in the resources section. So you know that this is one centralized place where you have the full context of what it is that you need to work on. So I do recommend that you leverage the resources section as needed for those most important tasks. And then also you can link other items from Party Matrix into here as well. And when you do that, you can even create dependencies that says one task blocks another task or is dependent on another task. So that's something that you can explore as a feature if it's necessary for you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our presentation here and wrap things up. If you're a manager, make sure you create a project for your team staff meetings and screen share. That's again, it's very straightforward. If you manage multiple sites or locations, so again, let's just say if you are a manufacturing manager and you oversee 3 factories, create a different project for each of those factories. It's very, very useful to track the priorities. But remember how you can create a dashboard project to even prioritize the projects themselves. So as you explore Party Matrix and as you add more and more projects, those dashboard projects actually become more and more useful to have one centralized place to see the priorities. And then the Gantt chart, by the way, within a project will actually pull in those due dates for those projects as well. So then you can actually have one centralized place to see sort of the timeline across multiple projects. And then if you have a lot of repetitive initiatives, or again, those employee onboarding tasks or customer onboarding tasks, then create the project templates. If you're a business owner, create a project for each of your department. This is actually really straightforward. I recommend that, with each of the head of your various departments, create a project with them, and then you can restrict those projects if you talk about sensitive things, but that allows you to have one centralized place to see all the priorities across your departments. And then if you're an individual contributor, I actually also recommend a third project, which is your promotion requests. And so this is actually where you go to create project, and then in the AI project, say, I want to be promoted, and then, type in your job title, and Matrix will generate a series of tasks relevant to that for you. So try that out and see if that's helpful, but that's a good starting point. What to do now, make sure you sign up for Matrix, and then if you use Microsoft Teams and Outlook, install it for those platforms. You can install the desktop apps, and actually what I like about the desktop apps is that Matrix will send you notifications. So for example, you have something due, you have something that's a reminder, or someone delegates you a task, Matrix will send you a notification, so it's very easy to see. Now, the challenge there is, how disruptive is that to your workflow, right? It's just like any notification system. But in reality, making sure that you address those most important tasks is really, really crucial. And so that's why my recommendation remains, don't track everything. You don't want 1,000 emails in the Party Matrix. You want to track those 20 emails that are really, really important. And then don't track every task. Track the tasks that, where you do have to make a decision around the priorities. And so the personal project is where you can highlight your top priorities. And then again, make sure you set those due dates and reminders. Ask your colleague to also use the Eisenhower method. I think it's just a very simple way to ensure everyone's on the same page. It's not the same as comparing to-do lists. People mistake that. It's not about asking everyone to write down the 15 things they have to do. You have to put it into the quadrants, because the hard part is not writing things down. The hard part is deciding what goes in quadrant 1 and 2 and 3. And so if you ask them to do that, that's when you find discrepancies, because you might all come up with 15 things, but you might prioritize them very differently. And that's where you have the most meaningful conversation. And then my advice in terms of using Matrix effectively, set 1 hour each week dedicated to reviewing your priorities. And people spend so much time working on things, they spend so little time thinking about what they should work on. And that's where you can make a big impact here. Just prioritize your work, prioritize your direct reports work, and just making sure that when you start your week, you start strong, and you know that you're spending time on the most critical things. And then make sure that you sit down and compare Party Matrix every single week. That's pretty much it. You have your meeting with your manager, bring up your Party Matrix. Anything that you're going to do, track it there. So then if someone asks you, hey, could you do this right now? Then you can say, I can, but what are we deprioritizing, right? And if you do that, I think you'll find that you have an easier time communicating your work to everyone else as well. Okay, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from this webinar, but also feel free to send me an email to hi@affluence.com. I'd be happy to answer your questions, especially related to any specific use cases. I've talked to thousands of customers over every use case imaginable, so I've seen it all. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I got a couple of questions here in the chat. Yes, I will send you the recording of this webinar, and then also we post it on our website at affluence.com/webinar. And then I got a second question, which is, you set up your personal projects, but now receiving emails about falling behind. That's actually really interesting. So, it's just a matter of setting those due dates. And so if you set those due dates and then you're getting these reminders, one of the things you can do is actually go ahead and update it, right? So you can change the due dates. And also, here you're saying you're getting emails around the notification. One of the things I can recommend is to actually turn off email notification the moment you've mastered sort of the skill of checking Matrix. So what I mean by that is, we actually don't want to send you emails. I think that's a bad thing, to get email reminders. So if you look at your reminders, one thing you can do is, there's a little thing that says unsubscribe at the bottom. If you click on that, it will take you to a view where you can choose what kind of notifications you get. So my recommendation is to turn off the email notification, and instead make sure that you focus on getting into Party Matrix, answer those emails, and look at those alerts and marking them as done as you finish those tasks. Hopefully that answered your question, but if you still need some advice on that, feel free to reach out to me. And then I see a question that around priorities. dismisses the fact that there are two dimensions. It's actually kind of interesting. So if you look at the Eisenhower matrix, you have the importance and urgency, right? So if I go back to the part matrix view here for you, one of the things you can do in part matrix is you can always filter by those dimensions. So for example, if I go to the search view here and I click on filter, I can choose exactly what quadrants I want to see. So, my recommendation is that once you add more tasks in part of matrix and you want to go and understand everything you have to do, look at this. I can click on my items. So now it suddenly shows all my items. And then I click on filters and I can say, you know what? Show me all the items that's in quadrant one. So these are my tasks that are important and urgent for me, right? And that's how you should use Party Matrix to make sure that you work on the most critical tasks. The next question I see is it possible to customize this to only have one or two quadrants? That's actually a very interesting question. If you want to do that, one of the things you can do is actually, if you select a project in Part Matrix, you can actually resize it. It's actually, if you want to focus just on one quadrant at a time, this is what I recommend that you do. In fact, what I like to do is I like to resize the quadrants every once in a while just to focus on, my list of things that are high priority. And then I just need to review the inbox once in a while and reprioritize them as needed. So that's what you would do. But if you just want to create a list in Part Matrix, that's what these other views are for. Can use the list view or the Kanban view, etc. if you want to have alternate views of Part Matrix. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. Thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. I appreciate the questions. Those are good questions. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at hi@affluence.com. And then also I'll send out this recording as soon as we get it processed. Thank you all. Appreciate it.